Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, great Biafrans and lovers of freedom. This is Radio Biafra House of Service coming to you through Radio Biafra London. My name remains Mars Jonathan Chinedu from Alo province of Biafra London. We are here live and direct. Today is the 14th day of May 2024. Therefore, I welcome each and every one of you to this special day. As you may know, we are in the month, our remembrance month, our heroes and heroines remembrance month, which will epic on the 30th. Therefore, today I have my host, one of the founding members of the Biafra Education Awareness Dissemination. That is what we are. Today we will start by some historical facts because we will keep on reminding you. Therefore, without taking any much time, I will hand over the platform to Mazi Dr. Ukachi Lois, who is going to, as you know, is our living library and historian, honestly. Therefore, please invite your friends and well-wishers to listen and to learn, so that our enemies will not be deceiving you, telling lies. We are writing our history by ourselves. Therefore, I will hand over the microphone to Mazi Dr. Lois. Dr. Lois Ukachi, please welcome to the program, and over to you. Please go on, Mazi.
Good evening, Mazi Jonathan. Greet you and everyone listening, lovers of freedom, Biafrans, even our enemies. It's a wonderful day because we've been given an opportunity to explain what happened to Biafrans. There are so many key topics we need to look at and review. One of them, of course, is the January 15th coup, which seemed to have triggered so many things which we're all still suffering from today. It's been said that if we learn anything from history, it's because we do not learn anything from history. We don't learn anything from history. So history is very interesting, and it's a subject which, while it's happening, you're part of the history, but then later on is subject to distortion. There are so many things written about the 15th of January, so much so they say there's an industry of January 15th, and sometimes they call them the January Boys. And as a result of the coup of 1966, that caused a counter coup and many more coups after, which led to war, and millions have died ever since. So it behooves us, therefore, to try to understand and unpack this particular tragic event. I'll be the first person to say to you, "Thou shalt not kill" remains an important edict, but regrettably, mankind will never learn. We need to actually understand, why is it that young, middle-ranking officers of Nigerian soldiers decided on the 15th of January to strike and get rid of a regime that looked from the outside world seemed to be a perfect example of a new independent country, whilst those on the inside have already started suffering. So Nigeria needs to be unpacked for the rest of us. And by starting with the 15th of January, permit me by saying right from the outset that it is definitely a Nigerian coup and not an Igbo coup. So I want to make absolutely certain we state that at the outset. So let me repeat it. The January 15th coup is not an Igbo coup. But you know, when you have a lie and you keep repeating it over and over and over again, people begin it's like if you're throwing mud or something, some of it will stick. The Igbo people have suffered as a result of this labeling, which was actually manufactured after people have celebrated the coup. It was welcomed by people throughout Nigeria, in the north, in the west, in the east, wherever you may be in Nigeria. There was an air of optimism. The university students, they celebrated the coup. Not that celebrating so people have died, they just wanted a change in Nigeria. So what was this change they wanted? Well, Nigeria, if you like, was ruled by Britain since 1862. And in 1960, it's supposed to have got its independence. This independence is a long story because during the Second World War, the Americans think tank got the British where it really hurts. Because when Winston Churchill went across the Atlantic Ocean to seek help from Roosevelt, the Americans said, fine, we are staying out of this war because it seems that the source of perpetual war in Europe is because of the empires you people keep having. So after this war, part of the criteria for us to help is that you must dismantle all your empires so that people throughout the world will be free. You don't have to keep seeing them. So that was the condition. Now, Churchill, who went to listen to all these, said he did not become the Queen's first minister to give away the empire. So for him it was difficult. The French said not in the foreseeable future would they relinquish all these empires. So we have a problem. When America, and after the Second World War, the plan they had, what we call area command, area sphere of influence. Sphere of influence means we want to rule, extend Americans' tentacles throughout the whole world, but they ran across the Russians who were getting very strong. And the Russians doesn't want it to be unipolar, wanted to have a bipolar world so that there's a check and balance. So the Americans' plan of making sure all these countries are freed wasn't going to work. You have to be under one camp, the American camp, or the Russian camp. So what they call the Cold War therefore started. Now for Africans, people like Nnamdi Azikiwe studied what was required, that every country should have a right to self-determination. So they laid it on the British government and slowly started working to free themselves from colonialism. So that was the target. So against that background, Nigeria was being ruled by Britain. And during the Second World War, Nigerian troops, people were sent to fight for Britain in various theaters of war. One of my grandfathers fought in Burma, and thousands, and in fact, lots of thousands of soldiers went to various fields, not just Africans, Ghanaians, Sierra Leoneans, Gambians, all these people, they all fought so that the Second World War would come to an end. When it ended, people like India realized it's time for them to have their independence. And of course, Africans decided it's also their turn. So what was the most important signal that they wanted freedom was during the Second World War. That's why I'm starting with that. There was a general strike during the Second World War in Nigeria, lasting for several days, up to 42 days or so. What was happening here was that because of the hardship of the Second World War, the Nigerian workers were not getting any increase in their pay, but their expat, the British workers, were getting their own fee, their own salaries increased to augment their day of living, because the cost of living was very, very high. But the indigenous people were not getting this. So there was a strike staged. This was the first time all Nigerians got together and did a strike, and that frightened the British. And from then on, they realized when these people are organized, they can grind the actual country into halt. So as a result, they had to come up with a strategy to make sure that Nigeria would not speak with one voice. Okay, the reason I'm saying this is because the coup we'll come to talk about was an attempt for the young officers to make Nigeria speak with one voice. So that was where I'm bringing this in. So because of the strike, the British made sure they find a way to divide and rule, which is usually their classic way of containing any, if you like, troublesome nation. So they devised a triple whammy for the Nigerians. They discovered that the people of the northern region weren't in a hurry to have independence. The people in the south were in a hurry to have independence. So they were able to see a wedge between them. So, as you can imagine, 45, that was the year where when the general strike started, they blamed it on the Igbos. It was the Igbos. They led the actual drive for the strike because Nnamdi Azikiwe was in charge of the Pilot. The Pilot was a newspaper, which is a foreigner of West Africa, Pilot and so on. So they said his articles were seditious and therefore he was proscribed. But as a result, they turned on the Igbos in Jos and massacred them. So the first killing. So as a result, there was a division between the northern workers and the southern workers. The northerners realized because of the way Britain have colonized the land, there's a definite gap between those in the north and those in the south. Let's give you an example. Secondary schools in the south was about 841, whereas in the north there's about 82 or 84. The issue now is that people who are coming out of secondary schools were more in the south compared to in the north. So you have a division in manpower requirements. So people from the south went up to the north to try and help develop the overall country. So that gap, the northerners said, we're not ready for independence as we approach this. So anything to do with uniting Nigeria, they pulled and kicked against it. So this again happened in 53 when it was proposed that we should go ahead and have independence as early as possible. They kicked against it and said their delegation who came to Ibadan were insulted, they were jeered, they were booed because they said they're not ready for independence. When they got back, this time in Kano, there was a riot, which again they turned on the Igbos, deliberately killing as many of them as possible. So every time we try to get Nigerians to do something as a country together, we turn on the Igbos. So against this background, when they say to you the January 66 coup was an Igbo coup, when after all those in the north celebrated, those in the west celebrated, those in the east said everybody celebrated because they wanted an end to corruption. They wanted better schools. They wanted everything to work for Nigerians. And this was driven by young idealistic officers who were from various tribes. Majority of them were of Igbo extraction. And the reason for that is because about 60% of the officer corps in the Nigerian army were from the eastern region at that time. This is, as I said earlier, because of the amount of schooling they went to, so they were more readily absorbed into the army as officers. Whereas the people who were the infantry, the non-officers, non-commissioned officers, majority of them were actually from the middle belt. They were from the TV area. and also the north was northerners. So we have therefore a Nigerian army led by majority of those in the south, both Igbos and Yorubas, who were running the officer corps. And there were obviously some from the north, but they were not in the majority. So when the coup came, it was because the predominant number of officers were of Eastern origin, so they can say, aha, what's happened here is that the Igbos have planned a coup to dominate the country in perpetuity. Well, let me explain this one. The issue of dominating the country in perpetuity was, again, British made. When they looked and know that the wind of change is blowing throughout Africa, most countries are getting independent, so Nigeria was gearing up to become independent. So they've got to set up a system where, although they have left Nigeria, but they're still indirectly ruling Nigeria. So how did this come about? Well, what they did was to try and preserve a federation where they gave the power to what the British always talk about, giving people who they can trust, or the safe pair of hands, where they can give the key to look after something for them. Imagine a landlord, you're looking for somebody who's going to manage the house for you, give those pair of keys to somebody who you can trust. The person they can trust in the Nigerian setting, of course, are those of the northern extraction. Why is that? Because they're not so argumentative. Does it matter if you argue? No. If you want to improve yourself, it does matter in the British setting, because you then can argue with them. In fact, during the Second World War, they found that the Nigerian troops, particularly of the Igbo origin, when you give them an order, they want to ask you reasons why this order and not doing it a different way. So they're really fed up with the way the Igbos appear to want to understand things. They absorb information, they put their own knowledge into it, they want to improve things. So if you give them something, they run with it. But those who listen to the British, if you like, they're their friends, because they had this culture which is driven in such a way that you have a hierarchical system. You have their mayors, their children go to school, but not everybody is allowed to go to school. They love their Islamic way of life, that is fine, there's nothing wrong with it. But then for modernity, if you want to run trains, run the post office, run banks and so on, people need to go and study the way the British have set it up. So when it comes to hiring people, surprise, surprise, those who have gone through the British system, through missionary system, were in a position to acquire those jobs. So while this was happening, there was becoming an imbalance between people of those in the southern region, Yoruba and Igbos, compared to those in the north. So we have a scenario where the social workers call the privileged pariah. So while you're in the north, you're more educated, you get the job, so the owners of the land are looking down and say, well, how come? This is our land, why are you getting our jobs? So I park that on the one side. When independence did come, or before it came, what British governors did was to make sure, as a price for the northerners to join into a country called Nigeria, they set up or rigged the system so that the majority will always be in the north. Let me explain that. They mapped out that there were more people, they claim, living in the north, okay, and compared to the south. So when it came to preparing people for election, for the independence, they gave more seat to those in the north compared to those in the south, so that as a result you have a preponderance of seats in the north. So the north were allocated 50% of all the total available votes, and in the south the remaining 50 just half to between east and west. So you have a system whereby east and west must come together for them to challenge the north. Or conversely, if you're from the North, you don't have to campaign outside the North to remain the Prime Minister or the head of the whole government forever in perpetuity. So the young officers looked at all this and found that we have a serious problem because they have been exposed. The people who are involved in the coup have been outside, they've been trained at Sandhurst, they've been in universities and so on. What they had was the system whereby because of the political setup, the Nigerian early development was blunted by tribalism. Those in the North on independence in 1960, within 11 days of that, Ahmadu Bello, who was the governor of the northern region, insisted that he published his, if you like, his mandate, that those who are in that the country, Nigeria, this new country, he says of Nigeria, is like, if you like, the property of their grandfather, of their estate. The way he put it is that is the estate of his great grandfather, Usman Dan Fodio. And he says, we will ruthlessly prevent a change of power, that we use the minorities in the North as willing tools and the South as conquered territory, and never allow them to rule over us, fair enough, but never allow them to have control over their future. So now, the situation here, this was published on Parrot newspaper, October 12, 1960. So with that in mind, we have an agenda from the North insisting that everybody else must be subjugated, whether they like it or not. So at independence, following an election, which the North had 50% already inbuilt in as the price for them to come in and have independent Nigeria. Without it, they weren't going to join the independent, if you like, bandwagon. Each time they tried to get to the stage where we call for an election or become free from Britain, they said, no, we're not interested. The only thing they'll be interested in would be if they had 50% of the votes. So that way they don't have to campaign outside the North to remain in power forever. So this person wrote in the Parrot on 11 days after independence that in the future they're going to use people to get what they want, because this country has been bequeathed to them, in other words, handed over to them as a reward for the as the great grandfather's Mandam Fodio, literally conquering the whole North. So let me now come back to this coup. So it is now widely believed that the coup of January 15th was a coup in two parts. One, to stop an Islamic agenda coup, which was scheduled on the 17th of July. Most people don't know this. And, of course, to stop the political drift and seize the opportunity to end the suffering which was happening in the western region at the time, the Yoruba land. The Yoruba were being slaughtered on a daily basis on what they call Operation Wet Air. Wet air is a term where you wet somebody with a petrol, you wet their car with a petrol, you wet their property with petrol, and you set them alight. Everybody, there's wild west in the western region. There was no peace or security. So the soldiers are often called in to quell all this and stop all the, to be on the government side and kill people and stop them from rioting. So it is the young officers then who have decided enough was enough. That Nigeria appears to be big for nothing. Everybody's looking up to it in whole Africa, but it's not behaving. Let me explain why this happened. At independence, the Northerners got the majority of the vote. In fact, before the vote has finished counting, the British Governor General declared that the North has won the election. Okay, now, so that left the southern southern electorates, either in the west or the east, to either become an ally with the northern Nigeria or join hand together and challenge. But they weren't in a position to join hand together. So Zeke and Awolowo were having their own different agenda. So they decided to buddy up with the North. So you have an alliance between the Northern People's Party and NCNC, which is the Southern People and the Eastern Extraction. So that left the Yoruba people, which they have action group, in isolation. So this was what the independence brought to whole Nigeria. So the Yoruba, Awolowo left for his region, his deputy, Akintola, and came to the Federation in Lagos to act as, if you like, the opposition leader. Whilst Zeke became, if you like, Governor General. He was, if you like, replaced as the Queen, as the President. It's like an honorary post. And he left Opara as the Governor of the East. And therefore, so you have the East buddying up with the North as a, if you like, an alliance. But this alliance was almost like a junior partner alliance. Every resources they had, as you say, the part of winning power in Africa was that your party will be in charge of giving out the money for development, be in charge of allocating where things are sited and so on. So if you're not in power, like in the Yoruba, they find themselves completely isolated and wanting to feed the crumbs. Of the amount of developmental funds available, 70% of it went to the North. And those that came to the North was very, very paltry. So they began, the alliance between the North and the East began to become a little bit shaky because they wanted to build steel industry in the East. No, it's got to be sited in the North. They wanted to, expand industry in the East. No, everything has to be in the North. So the South, and the Eastern side was getting fed up with not having any access to what they should have. If you want to run a country, you should distribute all the resources to everybody. So as a result of that, they bore in mind that their partner with the North is not working. The second crisis they faced was, okay, so you have all this electoral power. You say have more people in the North. Okay, let's test it then. Let's find out how many people there actually are. So they had a census. The census was counted, and it was believed that not as many people in the North as they claimed that they had. And so everybody realized that the number of people you declared in the census dictated how much money you got from the center. So everybody inflated the number of people they had. So in 1962, when they did an election, so when they did the census, the North had their own figures boosted up, the East boosted up, the West boosted up. So nobody actually knows the exact population we had. So they did a recount in a year later in 63. Suddenly we found 8 million people in the North in 1 year. So you begin to understand this is not going to be possible. And if you look at the whole West Africa, you note that people around the coastal region of all those countries have more in number than as you go further up the north, where there's more semi-desert. So how is it that Nigerian North has more people? And in those days, when you go to the north, you can drive for days without seeing any single village, or let alone a town. So where is all these people they had? And if you use satellite imagery now, you find the population density is usually more in the east compared to Nile Delta. There's nowhere else in Africa more populated than in the east, for example. So there's a mismatch in the actual population when you do the census. And yet, as a result of this false knowledge that there are more people in the north, every power is retained in the north politically, and in perpetuity. So the Yorubas realize they're going to be, if you like, in opposition forever, and they're not going to get as much, allocation to Yoruba to develop it as much as possible. So Akintola realized this is not going to happen. He wants a share of the cake, so he started to buddy up with the northern governor to Sadwana Sokoto. In so doing, he alienated. I'm just going to tell it in a simplistic way. In so doing, buddying up to the northerners, he alienated Awolowo, who was actually the main man in the Yoruba point of view, who was running the action group. So there was a meeting, a convention in Jos, I believe in 1962, where Akintola was accused of trying to upstage the party. So they sacked him. They said, you're no longer, you need to resign from your post, because he was the governor. He said, okay, if I must resign, this is not it's not a good idea, because he has his own people who supported him. So what then happened was they gave back to the House, the Western House of Parliament, after the convention, where they begin to have some rancor. When they got to the western part of the House of Parliament, there was this faction, which is Akintola's faction, and the Awolowo's factions. If you like, the action group was beginning to split. So the faction that belonged to Akintola went into the house because they were asked him to resign and the people were messing up. So they decided, no, this is not going to happen. So they took the maize and threw it at somebody. There was chaos inside the House of Western House of Assembly. So rather than dealing with it as a localized issue in the house, the government, who wanted the Westerners to join them in a coalition, because the one going with the Igbos is no longer in the eastern region, was no longer becoming to be friendly. So they now want the Yorubas to join in their government. So rather than isolate the crisis in the House of Parliament in the western region, he called it a state of emergency, threw tear gas inside the house and said everything shut down. So he sacked the house. The Prime Minister, Tafawa Balewa, decided to use brutal force and said state of emergency in the West, and everybody was shut down. So the West now have beginning of chaos. Awolowo said there's no state of emergency in the West because we're only dealing with what's happening in Parliament. But nonetheless, they suspended the whole of the Western region now. And they're saying what the best thing now to do is to test the popularity of Akintola. So they had an election. And the election was rigged. I'm trying to speed it up. So the election was so rigged that it defies belief. The way they rigged it was to say that the returning officer, when they're going to have another election, the returning officer does not allow the people who are not under Akintola to even contest, so they're not registered. And those who came to register, there'll be no electoral poll person to sign them up. So before the poll then is announced, they said such and such a person has returned unopposed. So they filled in the post as well as the usual stuffing of the ballot box. There's a phrase that men became pregnant overnight, in the sense that Agbada was stuffed full of papers, ballot papers, and they stuffed it and rigged the election in such a way that it was described that the election in the West shows that democracy has been raped. The Yorubas reacted angrily. So there was a lot of infighting, so much so there are people now in Dahomey, which is the next door neighbor. People emigrated to Dahomey for safety. People are being killed on a daily basis, and cars being burnt and so on, property not safe. So while this was going on, the military, the young, if you like, officers were watching with disdain. They don't know what to do. Each time they go to the pub to relax with their friends and say, but you're in the army. Why aren't you guys doing something? What's the matter with you? Your military, you need to come in and do something. This can't go on forever. So they're being goaded by some politicians and some of their friends. And when the killing gets too heavy, they call in the army to go and suppress them and kill more people. And then the other one, the civilians will run into the army barracks for protection. So the army was already becoming increasingly involved in the goings on in the West. So while this was going on, all the young majors at the middle rank, they know they need to do something. But if they want to do something, they can't. They've been trained by the British troops in Sandhurst and places like that, that your job is to protect the country, not to intervene with the government. So they can't hold it any longer. They started therefore plotting. So much so that Nzogbu, who was one of the people who carried out the 15th of January coup, he was a letter was written by one of his bosses to the army headquarters that he's going around trying to poison the minds of junior officers about the government. So in other words, beginning to talk openly to some people, and they're reporting him. So that there's something brewing. They're not happy with the way the country is going. Now, there are three people we need to talk about who were involved in this plotting and planning for the coup. One of them, of course, is Nzogbu. Nzogbu is his name is Sochima Patrick Kaduna Nzogbu. Kaduna is because he was born in Kaduna. His parents are from Panam, the Anioma, current Midwest. So he was born in Kaduna. He went to school in Kaduna. He spoke fluent Hausa. When he's not in the army uniform, wearing mufti, he calls himself a northerner, to be honest. Says, as far as he's concerned, he's a northerner. And in all his training, he wanted to be in intelligence. The first time in Sandhurst, they said, no, you're not ready for intelligence. You're going to go an infantry officer. So he was trained as an infantry officer. But eventually, as he grasped the knowledge, they allowed him to become an intelligence officer. So he was the first indigenous or the first Nigerian military intelligence in the army. So he has access to what was happening to his country. And so when the British handed over to him as the first intelligence officer, apparently there are lots and lots of files which the British took with them when they left. So he realized there are lots of things the British are hiding about the way Nigeria has been organized. So he started digging and investigating, trying to find out what is actually happening to his country. So he has a grasp and an understanding of what was happening at the military intelligence level. So much so that he was convinced that the only way to deal with this situation is to get people like-minded and begin to do something about the problem. So let me stop with him, and then people like what's his name? Let's talk about what's his name? Hold on. The Yoruba, there's a Yoruba guy, Ademoyega. So Ademoyega, he was also a bright lad. He went to Ibadan University before he joined the army. So he was upset what was happening to Yoruba people, and the same thing also happened for Ifajina. Ifajina also went to Ibadan. He was also a graduate, and he was basically all these people who are supposed to be Igbo were outside Igbo land. They were all in Yoruba. They have Yoruba friends and so on. The best friend of Nzogbu was Obasanjo, and so on and so forth. So they were conscious of what's happening in Yoruba land. This wetier, which the West was labeled as wild West. I'm talking about the Western region. This got to them, and they wanted to do something about it. If they took all this information to the people ruling the people who are head of the army, they'll be shut down. If you Heroines heard about it, it's nonsense. It can't happen. What else? All the other high-ranking officers, the colonel level, they will not, think about coup. It's not in their blood. because they're part of the government. So these young, if you like, idealists decided to get together and start planning what to do about the event. So this is really where the problem started. They made up their mind that the killings, particularly of civilians, and the rioting going on would not go on forever. It was the election of October 1965 that really blew everything out of the water, because with that there was no. It seemed as though you cannot change the politics of Nigeria through ballot box. It wasn't going to happen. So I hasten to add that when they did the first election in 1964, there was a boycott in the East because the rigging and everything was such that they weren't going to participate in the voting. So Zeke was asked to accept that the voting in the 64 election should be accepted. He said, no, it cannot be accepted because it's unfair. It's just not, it's procedural. So, so they had a lot of discussion about what to do with Nigeria, because it's only 4 years into its independence. They can't even run a simple election. So there was a shameful thing that was happening to the country overall. And there was looking at Nigeria as a shining example of what democracy can be. But what has happened was that the democracy was rigged by the British. If I call it failure engineering, they engineered it so it would never work. So as a result of all the goings on, it became necessary then for the army to do something to stop all the rioting. Now, so the January 15th coup, apparently within Nzevu, with all its intelligence information they had, they realized, or it was discovered, that there was another coup being planned on the 17th of January. And this coup was supposed to be a jihadist coup, whereby they take over the rest of the army and so on and so forth. So they decided, rather than keep planning, they need to strike and end all this nonsense. So it was 15th of January coup was designed to end the 17th coup, abort it. So therefore they plotted on how best to go about to carry out these coups. There are, if I just tell you the sites of the coup, there's one in Lagos, Ibadan, Kaduna, Enugu, and we need to take them one at a time. So the coup plotters planned, if you like, it was the north-south divide. The northern coup plotters was led by Nzevu. The southern ones was led by Ifajina. Ifajina, you recall, was a famous athlete. He won the gold in the Commonwealth Games, I believe, in 1958. And for those who are young enough to have those exercise books for someone doing a high jump, if you like, that was the avatar of Ifajina. It's one who they used for that high jump. So he was quite famous, an athlete, and he has very, very eloquent. He can convince people what they're supposed to do and so on and so forth. So therefore, these are the major planners. Nzevu in the north, Ifajina in the south, along with Ademoyega, Adeleke. There are other Ayewole. There are other people, not just Igbos, who are involved. I'm going to give you a list of those involved so that you know the ethnic mix. But nonetheless, the planning was perhaps not as meticulous as you ought to be, because the people they decided to eliminate were not one particular tribe. But in the execution of the coup, it appears to be one-sided. Why is it one-sided? Because it appears that the people from other tribes were killed, whereas the people from the east were not killed. So there's something that's gone wrong in the execution. And Nzevu was very, very upset. He said they bungled it in the south because his own site was okay. So let's just deal with the sites of the coup. Okay, so what happened in the north was led by Kaduna. Kaduna had the target for his coup was to get rid of the politicians who were, from his point of view, very, very corrupt. So what he did was to set up a plan or how to go about to eliminate the governor of the north. The governor of the north, as you know, is Saduana of Sokoto. He's also not only the spiritual leader, he's also the governor and the head of the MP was the MPC, the NMP. Sorry, hold on, is the party of the north. He has already joined MPC with the Yoruba people. They found a new party, which was part of the people now ruling the country. So he decided, because he's now the head of this particular new movement. So when Nzebu decided that he needed to be eliminated, he had a training exercise we call Operation Damitsa. Damitsa is being an instructor, the Nigerian Military Academy. He decided to have a night exercise. His night exercise was on the 13th of January, and so they went out with the troops for a night exercise and showed them which house to stake out and where to stay, and then that was that 13th. On the 14th, they repeated the same maneuver. On this occasion, they had live rounds of ammunition. And then he himself was not armed, but he was able to tell the people exactly what they were going to do. And the argument is, if they didn't like what he was going to do, they would have killed him. Because although he's an officer of Igbo extraction and he lived in Kaduna all his life, it seems, they respected him as one of theirs. And when they explained to them what they were going to do, they agreed with him and they said, if anybody is not happy, they can go away. No need to join this. So basically, the soldiers who he was leading were predominantly of the Hausa extraction, the northern extraction. So when the time came, so he then told them that they're going to eliminate the governor of the northern region and get rid of all the politicians who are so corrupt and so on and so forth. People agreed, and they went to his residence, and because his residence was well guarded, they used anti-tank to break in. And Zogun himself was injured. He had a shrapnel wound in his neck and also injured his arm, and they went looking for the Saduana. When they found him, they shot him, and his wife tried to protect him. She was also killed in the process. I believe also his private secretary and his private secretary and also his security officer, those guys were also killed. So the next group with Nzebu was the ones that went to go and see Ademilogu. Ademilogu was one of the chief military officers in the army at the time. He was a brigadier, and he went, and so the team under Nzebu went to his residence and they also killed him. So then there was another person, and not only that, they also killed his wife, Latifa. So Ademilogu was a good friend of Ahmadu Bello, and so they killed him as well as Ahmadu Bello. And then the other person they killed was, I believe, hold on, Shedende was also killed up in the north at the time. So, and the other group went and guarded important areas in the north where the radio station, where the broadcast and so on were stationed. Now, up in the north, there's a battalion in Kano where Ojukwu, Odumogu Ojukwu was the battalion commander. He heard, or it was telegraphed, that there was a coup while he was in a parade. So what he did was to, before he informed his troops, he locked up all the weapons in the armory, sent the key to one of his relatives in town so that no one could get access to the armory. He then called his friend, who was the Emir of Kano, Bayo, and both of them were in the car driving up and down the town, reassuring people and calming them down. When they finished that, he then took him into the army barracks to protect him. So Ojukwu, you would recall, welcomed people who went to the Commonwealth meetings, which took place just before the coup started. They welcomed them back to Kano when they returned. So this, I'm just illustrating this because Ojukwu is Igbo, and so is, if you like, Nzegu. Although Nzegu has been in the north, it appears that they're totally different type of personalities. Ojukwu is part of the establishment. Nzegu wants to change. So what then happened between those two? Nzegu wanted anybody who wants to be part of the revolution to declare that they are part of the revolution. So Ojukwu stood on the fence, not giving him an impression, but managed to disarm his own people. So Nzegu then asked him to pay money to Nzegu's troops. Ojukwu refused. Then Nzegu sent someone called Captain Ude to go and talk to Ojukwu and explain to him what they are doing, what this revolution is. So Ojukwu locked up Ude. So Nzegu was very, very cheesed off. So he set up, he took up armored personnel carriers, set up to go and invade and attack Ojukwu for being stubborn. So he was spoken to, and he was talked down and said it's not the way to go. So by Madiabu said they weren't going to go there. Otherwise they'll have had a bloodbath. They would be fighting soldier against soldier. So that is what was happening in the north. So the north, therefore, was incomplete. Although they killed the premier, they killed some other officers, which are quite important. But the actual what is it? All these people they have managed to kill, but it did not make the whole north completely compliant because Ojukwu managed to block any further access in the north. Because Kano is a strategic town, it's got international airport, and is not loyal to Nzegu. So that almost made the north not successful as far as the coup is concerned, short of attacking Ojukwu. So the Kano was not really the north was not really well secured, although he managed to kill the key components there. Now, the other person you need to mention here is Katsina. Katsina was the son of the emir of Katsina, and he was a major up in the north. But he need to declare whether it's for Nzegu or it's not for Nzegu. He managed to say, of course, it's for Nzegu, otherwise they may have been killed. So they were able to work together without any casualties from those from Nzegu. So, but later on, as you find out, Nzegu has to hand over power to Katsina. But we'll talk about that shortly. So that was what happened in the north. In Ibadan, in the west, what happened was that someone called Captain Wilbusi was sent to deal with the governor of the west, who is Samuel Akintola. But he went and arrested Femi Kayode, who was the deputy to Akintola. And when he took him away, the wife of Kayode phoned Akintola and said the army had just been, and so Akintola was ready for the military. So when they arrived at this place, Captain Wilbusi with his troops shouted from the court, "Come in, you're under arrest, Akintola, la la da da da." So Akintola did not comply, didn't come out, but instead he opened fire on them. So there's some place you read about 3 of his soldiers were killed. So they had a gun battle. So Akintola tried to defend himself, eventually ran out of bullets and they killed him. So the governor of the west was killed. And so that was now. In Lagos, we have a serious problem. In Lagos, what was happening with all the army officers was that they was having a party that night, celebrating Mamilari's second wife. Unfortunately, his first wife had died, he's married, and so all the big wigs in the army came to celebrate with him. So, if you like, it's like everybody in the army came along for this party, and so when the party was, people who were invited to the party was a concentration of all the major army officers, people like Pam, Yakubu Pam, people like Lagaman, people like Mamlarin, and of course, and Muhammad Kerr. So there are major officers who came to that party, including Major General Agi Urensi. Now, Agi Urensi, after the party started, towards the end he left and went to another party. So now the people who were in charge from the coup point of view, who were going around killing all these people in Lagos, were under Ifajuna. Ifajuna's job was to eliminate all these major high-ranking officers. So one of them was Pam. Pam, when they went to him, they killed him, and he reported. His wife then phoned the prime minister's office, and also phoned Agi Urensi. So Agi Urensi was alerted that this is what's happened. So Agi Urensi, from where he was, because they went to look for him in his house, he wasn't there. He went to another party. When he came back, he got a phone call from Pam's wife, Elizabeth Pam, and told him that there's been a coup, that the military have taken his husband. So he rushed out to go and see what he can do to save. They're taking the husband to the army headquarters mess. So Agi Urensi rushed to go and see if he can be there, but by the time they're taking him away. So then Agi Urensi realized there's a coup going on. The soldiers on the street. So one of the roadblocks they laid to arrest him, and see, he went there and shouted at them, "Get out of my way!" So they were so scared of him, so they moved out of the way, and he went to the headquarters and began to mobilize all the officers who are loyal to him. One of them is Yakubu Gowon, and others were also surrounded. What's his name? Major Ejo, and so Lieutenant Colonel Ejo. So there are other people who are loyal at this stage. So because they begin to get people under him, because he's he's general officer commanding. So he mobilized his troops, then began to dismantle those who are doing the coup. Those who are doing the coup realized the major general has not been killed. He's supposed to have been killed. So when he saw them, he said, "Get out of my way," because they thought they killed him, but he was still alive. So they panicked, and they all started running for their lives. So in other words, in the Lagos, there was a mess. They didn't quite carry out the plan they had initially planned. So it didn't work out for them because Major General Agi Urensi stood in the way and managed to foister, if you like, spoil their plans. So he then managed to rally around and secure Lagos, which is the capital at the time, so that those who are doing the coup were not able to carry out all the plans they had. So, by the end of all these goings on, it appears then that up in the north, where Nzegu was, he managed to carry out the coup to a certain success, and if you like, albeit partial, because he didn't quite take on Kano. But in Lagos, it was a complete mess. A lot of people were killed, but at the same time, they did not get control as they planned. In Ibadan, they killed the premier. So what was happening in the Midwest and in the East? In the Midwest, there was no military formation there. And in the East, there's one military formation, the 1st Battalion. The person commanding was Ejo. He went to this party in Lagos, so he wasn't around. So what they did was, when they realized what was going on, so they decided to send somebody quick, send Ejo to go back and give command in those in Enugu. In Enugu, you had Archbishop Macarius, who was finishing his visit to Nigeria following the Commonwealth meeting. So he was in Enugu trying to meet with Opara. Opara is the governor of the eastern region. So the troops who were supposed to arrest him were surrounded the area waiting for command. The command didn't come. Okafor and and Ifajina were racing to Enugu to go and give the order because there's nobody there who will give the order. So as a result, when Aguirre dismantled the coup and all the intentions in the north, he sent Lieutenant Major to go back to Midwest in a hurry to go and take command of Enugu. So he took a plane while the others were racing in the car. By the time they got there, he got there before them and disarmed the soldiers who were surrounding the house where the Archbishop Macarius and the governor were. So there was no international incident. So that was diffused. So in Enugu then, you did not have anyone killed as a result of it. Now, the other prominent Igbo person was Nnamdi Azikiwe. He was not, of course, in Lagos. He's not in anywhere in Nigeria. He's been in Britain since August of that year, receiving some treatment for his lung condition. So when the coup started, he was recuperating from his operations. He was nowhere to be found. So if you look at the demographics then of those who were killed, it appears that those people from the east, the Ophara was not killed, and in the Midwest, where you have Osadebe, he was not killed. There's no military formation there, so he was also not killed. And of course, Azikiwe, as I said, who is the president, was out of town. So if you now look at so when you look at demographics of those who were killed and those who were not killed, it appears that the other regions were eliminated apart from the east. So this is one of the contentions that it's an Igbo coup because you didn't kill any of your own. I remember vividly as a young lad on the back of a bicycle in a village back home. When my grandfather was stopped on their way to another village, part of a village, and they were having a conversation. I don't know what made me say this. I just remember him saying with the other elderly gentlemen saying that the coup, when they heard about the coup, that it appears that nobody of the Igbo origin was killed. So it doesn't seem quite fair. So even at the village level, everybody knew. But that aside, majority of people the next morning, this was a Friday night, all this happened. On the Saturday morning, Nigeria woke up to there's been a military coup. There's a rumor. Hey, come and see an explosion of joy. Because at this stage, the country was, from the military point of view, the young officer point of view was drifting. Everybody was just waiting. Something's got to be done. This killing can't go on in the east, in the western region, because of all the wet air and all the turmoil, the politicians thinking that they own the whole country and so on and so forth. So it was, I don't know why they're celebrating, but they found it necessary to say at last Nigeria will come down with tyranny, down with corruption, down with all sorts of things, and they now welcome in a way this coup that occurred on the 15th of January. So let's put it together. It is a multi-ethnic driven coup, not an Igbo coup. I prove that to you. The names of the people who were involved in the coup, as I've given you the reason, were predominant number of officers were from the eastern region because of the imbalance in those who entering the army at the officer cadet corps. There were about 60% of the military officers of the eastern region, whereas others, those from the north, and predominantly the infantry and the low-ranking officers. But they do have higher officers from other parts. So there's the ethnic mix of the coup plotters who carried out the 15th of January coup are Ifajina, who is from the east, Nzogun, who is from Midwest Delta, Ukachi, who is from the east, Onwategu, who is from the east, from Delta. You have Chupuka, who is from east, Ubienu, who actually changed his mind and acted as it disappointed the people, and it was through him that Agri-Rents was able to overpower them. So Soke, who's from east, Haranya, who's from the east, Anaforo from the east, Bulie from the east, Mobusi from the east, Oji from the east, Ude from the east, Udaja from the east, Ukafa from the east. Someone called J.C. Ojukwu is from the east, not Lieutenant Colonel Ojukwu. The Ukafa is from the east. Oguchi, who was sent to the east. Ukachi was from the east. Ibik, which is from the east, although Akwa Ibom extract. And then, of course, Ebiko, who's from the west, Midwest. Now, from people who are non-Igbos, for some no reason, they put Lieutenant Colonel Victor Banjo, who's from the west. He wasn't there initially as part of the coup plotters, but he was arrested later because he had a gun as he went to see Major General Heroines. They thought maybe he's part of the coup, but I put him in bracket. So Major W. Ademoyega is also from the west. Adeleke is from the west. Jalo is from the north. Swanton is from the north. Oyewole is from the west. Waribo is from the eastern extraction, from the rivers. Castina is from the north. Ola, not the Major Castina, but the Second Lieutenant T. Castina is from the north. Ola Fa Nihon is from the west. Aha is also from the Midwest. Dambo is from the north, and Tampera is from the north. So there are ethnic mix, therefore, those who went round to do this coup from various ethnic origin. Now, I've already explained to you those who were killed, and the civilians were the Prime Minister, who is Tafawa Balewa. Then you have Alhaji Ahmadu Bello. Sorry, Tafawa Balewa is by Gara as a tribe. Bello is from Fulani. Akintola is Yoruba. Ukitiebo, who is Isekiri. Festus Isekiri. Festus Ukitiebo is from Isekiri, is the finance minister. Mrs. Latifa Ademunegu is from Yoruba. You have the victims in the military, Brigadier Samuel Ademunegu, Yoruba. Brigadier Zachariah Mamlari is from Kanuri. Colonel Kerr Mohammed is Kanuri. Colonel Ralph Sodainde is from Yoruba. Then the Lagaman is Kanuri. Yakubu Pam is Beroun. And Lieutenant Colonel Arthur Unebe is Igbo. So there are a mixture of the victims from various tribes. So those who were singled out and missed was, of course, Major General Aguirre. They didn't kill him because he managed to escape, and those in the north, those in the east of Opara, they didn't get him because the army surrounding were disarmed, and so on. So that is the issue then of the ethnic mix of those who were involved, who were killed, and so on. Now, so who carried out this coup? Is it tribally motivated? The answer is really no, because if you like, the person in the north, Paul Nziob, was the one they look up to, because when he realized that the actual the coup in the south has failed, he reacted he was very upset. So he went on the radio, made a broadcast. And so the broadcast, which he did to give the country an idea why they did the coup. So it says our enemies are the political profiteers, the swindlers, the men in high and low places that seek bribes and demand 10%. Those that seek to keep the country divided permanently so that they can remain in office as ministers or VIPs of waste. The tribalists, the nepotists, those that make the country look big for nothing before international circles, those that have corrupted our society and put the Nigerian political calendar back by their words and their deeds. So what Nzegu is telling is that tribalism as an ethnic agenda was not, therefore, certainly one of the major problems which Nzegu was saying and his men sought to crush. They wanted to dismantle nepotism, tribalism, and so on. So their coup, which, as I said earlier, he was very, very upset. They didn't occur as he planned it in the south, compared to how he was able to sort it out in the north. So in the north, the people who did the coup plot to manage to get ministers in the north to sign that they are loyal to Nzegu. Now, so we now need to answer our question: why is this not an Igbo coup? Okay, so the most important information I got in my studies is what I call the Guy report. GUY. The most important telling report on this coup is what I call the Guy report. The Guy report is an investigative panel made up of acronym G for Gowan, U for Usman, and Y for Yusuf. So who are these guys? These are the northern guys which Major General Aguirre himself asked to investigate and find out who carried out this coup and why they carried out this coup, to prove whether it's an Igbo coup or not an Igbo coup. So that is, most people don't talk about this one. They just say, because of the people they killed, it must be an Igbo coup. By the way, nobody, when they heard this, thought it was an Igbo coup at the time, because they were celebrating throughout the whole country. But later on, they manipulated it and labeled an Igbo coup as a justification for killing the Igbos. But here is what Major General Aguirre did. He sent 3-person board of investigations to look into the coup. They were all exclusively northerners. MD Yusuf is one of them. He's the head of the country's special branch. I've mentioned Gowan already. Colonel Gowan, who arrived on the night before the coup started, was Aguirre's appointed him Chief of Army Staff. So he was part of the investigation panel. The next person is called Captain Baba Usman. It's military intelligence. So these 3 prominent northerners were asked to look in and find out who did this coup. So there were about 200 officers. It took them 3 months to investigate, by the way. 3 months' work. About 200 officers were interviewed, and some other personnel in the military, including principal leaders of the event, they were interrogated. There were important coup documents retrieved from Lagos, Ibadan, Abeokuta, Kaduna, Zaria, and elsewhere, were exhaustively evaluated. They were looking for the reason why the coup occurred. When was it ready? It was witnessed by Effiong. He said the panel reported. And they said, as far as they're concerned, this was not an Igbo coup. Unbelievable. But they begged Aguirre not to publish it, because Gowan has leaked the information to the northern elders because they're looking for a smoking gun. They couldn't find it. So they made sure that they didn't publish it either. Okay, so unknown to Aguirre, he was trying to appease the North. If he didn't publish it, according to the elders, then everybody will be happy. They did not publish it. But in not publishing the report that this is not an Igbo coup, it was later, buried and used as an excuse to turn around and say this is an evil coup, and turn the whole thing against the evil people. So, majority of officers indeed involved in the action were mainly from the south, and particularly Igbo, we know that. There were no evidence whatsoever to suggest or indicate that the coup was a South or indeed some Igbo conspiracy to seize and control the country. Nzegu and his group acted alone. That is the key. They acted alone. They didn't consult people in the Igbo land or a pregnant woman who was later cut open and baby brought out. Nobody asked them that we're doing this coup on your behalf. So when they turn around and say it's an Igbo coup, remember it has been investigated. So they acted alone. In May 1966, the board submitted its report to the government. But while the government studied it, prior to publication, Colonel Gowan, who was board member and army staff who was working, we believe, with the British intelligence in Nigeria, leaked its main content to the British diplomatic mission in Lagos and a number of ex-politicians and local government leaders in the north. Gowan's motive was essentially to coalesce, join together activities of anti-Aghi forces, of course, whose interests are shared, so into some form of a revolt. The North leaders were extremely disappointed with the finding of the investigation, despite the fact that it was carried out by well-known and respected North security officers. So you have three prominent Northern people looked into it. They did not find a shred of evidence that this is an Igbo coup. I have to keep repeating this. So they felt all along that the South, especially the Igbos, would be found culpable, and they felt coup. They expressed their disappointment, the series of memorandum, and of course a representative made to the subject to both the central government and to the Northern Region Military Administration Cabinet. So they specifically called for Aghi not, I repeat, not to publish the Commission's report. Interestingly though, even General Obasanjo in 1987, he also did a study on the failed coup. That was 21 years later. He came to the same conclusion, of which Gawan, Usman, and Yusuf, GUY report. So remember that. So he came to the same conclusion that, namely, that Nzegu and his group acted, or their action was not an Igbo plot to seize power. This is despite the fact that Obasanjo, as you know, at that time, ended up joining the army and killing people during the war. He knew this was not an Igbo coup because he was with Nzegu the day afterwards. Now I'm going to read for you, if I can find it, a letter which Nzegu wrote while he was in prison. He wrote it to his friend. Obasanjo, just to let him know, what's been happening to them, because all the coup, those who were involved in the coup, were all rounded up, and they were being investigated thoroughly, if you like, whipped and punished, and so on and so forth. I didn't tell you how the coup ended. Let me just tell you what happened when Heroines took over. Heroines managed to smash the coup in the north, in Lagos. Ojukwu made sure Nzegu didn't get his way in the north. And as investigated, is not an Igbo coup. The issue now is, what do we do? So Nzegu said, because the people in the north, in the south, have messed up, the next morning he assembled a powerful troop in 3 columns: one to march towards Enugu, one to go through to Ibadan, and then go to Lagos, and the other one to go to Kenji Bridge or so. So he had developed 3 strong-pronged attack to attack the south to make sure that the coup succeeded. You have the problem then. If Nzegu marched south, there would have been a civil war. at that stage. This coup could have led to Nigerians killing Nigerians. So Madebo was close to where Nzegu was. He has to sit him down and say, look, you've done very well. This thing has been done. We know the problem with Nigeria and so on and so forth. But look, if you march down south, you're going to meet the Nigerian forces. There'll be Nigerian soldiers killing Nigerian soldiers with civilian casualties, which we're trying to avoid in the first place. And they arguably have access to international, international countries for further help. You run out of weapons, and there may be a problem for you. So basically, Madebo dissuaded him from marching or launching this attack in the south to make the coup to work. The coup will work if more people were killed, but that's not what the whole thing was about. So he was talked down. His friend, Comrade Mawo, was also sent from Lagos to come and talk to him and say, look, this thing can't go on. So to cut a long story short, Nzegu then made a decision to surrender to Major General Heroines so that there won't be a civil war. Nigerian troops in the north fighting those in the south. They was going to attack Ojukwu first of all anyway. So let's put it together. What happened or what transpired was Nzegu decided to hand over power to Aguiyi, and he says his conditions are as follows: that those who were involved, they should be pardoned. Those who were killed, their relatives should get compensation. In other words, those who were killed during the coup, they should get compensation. These people who were under him should not be molested. He himself will need to. They persuaded him that he will be part of the interim government, so that the revolution which he started, or which his group started, will work, because even the Heroines realized the whole country welcomed it. So they were, if you like, insubordinate. They disobeyed orders, military rank and so on. But what they did, the country welcomed it. So they were popular, but at the same time, they need to be punished. So before Nzegu handed over power, so they demanded certain conditions to be met, which Heroines promised him. So he handed over power to the newly appointed Katsina, who was made from major to lieutenant colonel, to govern the whole northern region as a military governor. That is when Ojukwu was appointed to govern eastern region, Ejo was appointed to govern midwestern region, and Fajuyi was appointed to govern western region. So Nzegu therefore was escorted back down from Kaduna with Mawo and came back down to Lagos. When they arrived in Lagos, they had a huge military, well-armed people waiting for him at the airport. The first place he went to was the Diaraba, the Lagos University Teaching Hospital, where they got to see a wound in his neck. The surgeon who saw him thought the best thing to do is to leave the shrapnel wound in his neck because it's too dangerous to operate. So the person he escorted him, Muratala Muhammad, and they all had machine guns and so on pointing at him. So they took him to lock him up in Kirikiri prison. So this letter I'm going to read to you is written from Kirikiri prison by Nzegu to his friend Obasanjo. Okay, this was a letter he wrote to his friend, and it took a while just to say how they were. It says in January 24th, Ezigbo Obam, that's what he calls us, Obasanjo, Ezigbo Obam. So this is Major KC Nzegu. Ezigbo Obam, he says, I have now left the hospital as the doctor thinks it is more dangerous to operate on me than to leave the shrapnel in their present position. I was taken out on the 20th, and I'm still around here. Please look after my property and my car. At a later stage, I may want the car disposed of. Uh, if I can get enough to pay, if I can get enough to pay off the UDC and secure a little profit, whatever that means. You will now need to look after my parents, whose address he gave. Please set in contact with Malam Ed, whose address he gave. I have still not seen the Supreme Commander. So this on the 26th. He came down on the 17th, I believe. No, he came down the 19th from Kaduna after a military parade in which he handed over power to Katsina. But he was in the hospital when he arrived. He hasn't seen the Supreme Commander. And I saw Njoku only on the first night of my art. And then he says, tell Tim Onwategu to collect all my books. Tell him also I have not found any of the books he asked for. Just carry on. The most important letter I want to read to you is what he wrote from Krikri prison. So still got a sense of humor. So he says on the 4th of February, my dear Oba, I can probably smuggle out this letter to you in spite of the strict security which forbids us to let anyone know our whereabouts. You probably know already. The story is that when I got to Lagos on the night of the 19th of January, I was first taken to the Lagos Teaching Hospital. Almost 24 hours later, Iwoba and Muhammad Murtala were sent to come with a guard of 2 private soldiers armed with Tommy guns and Browning in an open Land Rover to arrest me. There are 20 officers here and about 130 ORs, I believe, orderlies. Now, the officers are as follows: Colonel Banjo, Don Okafor, Aya Aranya, Mobosi, Adeleki, Udeja, Ezidiwo, Tajani Katsina, then Ebiko, Nweke, Ejijofo, Boke, Okaka. So basically, list all the people who are with them. There were 21 of them officers and other orderlies. So it says Banjo and Ahanya were arrested for the same offense. The former, meaning Banjo, was arrested for giving the weapon to Banjo. Ahanya was arrested for giving the gun to Banjo. Now, Ifajuna and my colleagues in the south made such a nonsense of this affair with result that people are accusing us of being one-sided. This is Nzegu's view of what happened at the coup. The so-called loyalist troops, under the influence of Supreme Commander, edged on by certain tribalists, encouraged private soldiers and NCOs to cane and maltreat some of those officers and the men now in Krikri, whilst they were under detention in the Federal Guards and the 2nd Battalion. They were beaten with kobokos daily, starved, and forced to drink urine at gunpoint. Mobosi nearly had his eye poked out with a rifle muzzle, and Oyowele, who is still admitted to the military hospital, had his forehead and nose smashed with butts of the rifle in the presence of Ekenem, Captain Iwe, Major Ale, and a few other loyalist officers. If you see the men here in prison, you will be sorry for them. Kobokos and bayonet wounds all over the face and the body. It is terrible. In fairness to them, loyalists, he said, they were probably acting so in order to please some factions of the army that felt the human loss. But that is not how to soldier. We get VIP treatments in the prison. or all warders or prisoners respect me as head of the revolutionary group. We are not allowed to write letters stating that where we are, nor are we allowed to give details of this place. One corporal was shot dead, and one Sergeant Nathaniel badly wounded by tribalist troops of the Federal Guard. The character of the revolution in the North was entirely different because of the organization, which included every shade of person. In the South, the northern officers of troops feel that the coup is aimed against the North. Everyone seems quite jittery in this end, and they will fire at anything that moves. The army is completely untrained, and will not need a lot of cleaning out and training. And will need a lot of cleaning out and training. We do not know how long we're expected to be here. Okay, so this is him writing from Krikri. He says in one of the letters from Krikri Hospital, from Krikri prison, said the Krikri University. So that's where he was locked up after he surrendered. So I read this out because coming back from when I started out, as I round up, if it was an Igbo coup, it would be difficult to explain how someone like Nzegu, who is a true nationalist, could be involved, because he doesn't know what's happening in the East anyway. He's from Midwest, but is blamed as an Igbo coup, so that they use as an excuse to murder Igbos. So Nzegu was extremely upset that he found himself during the war, the Biafran Nigerian War, in the Biafran front, and he was killed in the Nsukka front. And if they think he's a tribalist, what is strange is that they took his body and buried him in Kaduna Military Cemetery, because they all respected and feared him, because he was one of their best Nigerian troops which they produced. So he was not a tribalist. He wanted Nigeria to be better, but the execution of the coup disappointed even himself, and it didn't solve the problem it was set to solve, because Nigeria is not designed to be solved by any particular group of people. And this is the closest it got to finding a country that works for everybody, because the politicians of the First Republic really let everybody down. I'm not saying they should have been killed. In fact, by killing those people who were involved in plotting the second coup, we cannot get the access and information to address them. They could have arrested these people, but that's me talking. It's very easy to say, but when you come to arrest somebody and they're shooting at you, it's difficult to do otherwise. So for all the people who have died following this coup and subsequent deaths which has followed it, may their souls rest in peace. So therefore let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be accepted in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my redeemer. Thank you very much, Master Jonathan. That's it for now.
There were Mazi. Thank you very much for saying it, and I hope people listen. Mazi, we need to continue in this history, honestly, because we are fed with the wrong side of the story. That is it. It's very, very sad. So I don't know. There is something, before you call it a quit, Maz, right from the onset, on your own point of view, why are mostly the Easterners, the Igbos, highly enthusiastic in saving Nigeria right from the onset? What do you think about it? Because everything, yes. And it's till today, still going on till today. Why? Why is it?
Yes, I think the concept of saving Nigeria, having a country which everybody belongs to, is just in the Igbo DNA. They want things that is fair for everybody. It took them a long time to realize that they're not really welcome. This this occurred during the war, because for them to actually declare Biafra, it took them a whole year. You could have thought, Ojukwu said, if he'd known what he knows now, that was after the war, he would have declared Biafra as soon as the killing started in the north. Yeah? Because if May to October 1966, they're killing us, they don't want us, so we declare Biafra. We would not be in this mess today. But when the people came back, because we have vested interest, as you pointed out, in making sure Nigeria works, we thought maybe, they killed us in 45, they killed us in 53, this one may settle. And indeed, when the killing started in May, which we're going to talk about another date, when the killing started in May, what the Ojukwu did was to go to Bayero and all the emirs and say, look, this must stop. And they say, yeah, we agree, this will stop. We're not going to kill any more Igbos. In fact, they should all be welcome back. So what happened? People rushed back to the north, and that was in May. And also, Agi Renzi was in charge at that time, so he sent troops to go and stop the killing. But when Agi Renzi was killed, and over 200 Igbo officers killed, there was nobody to defend the Igbos, or people of Eastern origin, even though they were keen to maintain Nigeria. Yeah, in fact, Ojukwu's own father, would you believe, was insisting people went to the conference to discuss how we're going to live together. Yeah, it was during this conference that the night Ojukwu's father tried so hard to persuade people to go up to represent the Eastern region in the conference table which Gowon initiated. It was during that conference that more people got killed, that they realized, no, this Nigeria thing we're trying to save is no longer for us. So, Onyasasa had also one for just win. Now, the person who's rejected by others cannot reject himself. But that's when that concept was then drilled in them, and then they realized, they've been pushed out of Nigeria. So you're right in raising that question. It was Ojukwu says, when we don't want to leave Nigeria, but if we are pushed, we will have no choice. And when the time came, the university student, University of Nigeria in Nsukka was telling him, the push has come. The push has come. Therefore, declare Biafra. So that is where we're heading. So Biafra has been come, and then the war is over. So why are we then still coming back in and trying to save something you cannot save? Because they have not understood the history that right from, as I read at the beginning, right from the Ahmadu Bello's mandate or declaration, October 12, 1960, the new nation called Nigeria should be an estate of a great-grandfather Usman Dan Fodio. That is a statement, okay? We must ruthlessly prevent a change of power. We use the minorities in the north as willing tools and the south as a conquered territory, and never allow them to rule over us, and never allow them to have control over their future. Now, if you're in a country where some people have that sort of mindset, you need to retrace your step. So I'm not sure if I've answered your question. So that's my take on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Maz. You've answered it. Anyway, do not forget that you are listening to Radio Biafra House of Service coming to you through Radio Biafra London. Today is the 14th day of May 2024. I have been here with Mazi, Dr. Lois Ukachi, and thank you very much. I don't know whether you can still make maybe a minute of your pattern shot so that we continue, because do not forget that of this history will also continue, this dissemination will also continue on Thursday, being the 16th day of May 2024, the same time. So Mazi, I don't know if you have your closing remark for today. You know, it's very sad when we revisit our history, but that is part of our history. So, Mazi, please, your parting
Yes.
shot, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And is what I presented is a sketch of what actually happened. It is difficult to read it and not feel upset that the politics that drove these killings hasn't changed. Okay, you can't say people should vote and then you rig their vote. That's really the bottom line. There's a need for, if you're going to vote, you vote and make sure your vote counts, and that whether you lose or win, you've got to have the right to declare where you stand when you're voting. And democracy, or them all crazy, may be not the perfect solution, but so far is the one they've come across. And democracy is not a foreign thing to Africans. In the Igbo land, we are democratic by nature. So, to cut a long story short, when we understand why this coup occurred, the trigger for it is because people felt completely hopeless. There's nothing in the Western region they could have done to stop further killings. Okay? So the Yoruba was killing Yoruba. Now they're so united, the Igbo haven't learned that yet. So it's very, very interesting. So we're going to explore what happened when this coup, which we saw, which was a Nigerian coup, was then welcomed initially, was then turned upside down and used as a template by repeated broadcasting, playing the voices of the Saduana Sokoto, the Prime Minister, reminding people in the North, in Radio Vision, Kaduna, constantly playing over and over and over again, so that those in the North realize, oh, this is an Igbo coup. And they turned the whole thing around. Instead of a way of trying to make Nigeria realize they need to work together in unison, the North decided enough is enough. We're now going to break away from Nigeria. And the only way to do that is to get a revenge. Is if you're going for a revenge match, there's no VCR in those days. There are no virtual action replays. They decided. They're the referee. They're the umpire. They're the linesman. And they said it's an Igbo coup. Nobody asked them why or how. They just decided the return match and kill as many people as possible. That's what we'll be discussing next time. The so-called July coup, which is definitely an ethnic coup from the Northerners. And that's the coup that killed Nigeria, in fact. So we'll discuss that next time. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mazi. Thank you. And see you again in the next 2 days on Thursday. Thank you very much. There were Biafrans and lovers of freedom. We have come to the end of today's program. We are not holding this or hosting this program as entertainment. No, it is a sad history of what happened to us. There is no way we can change the past, but we shall and should never forget what happened to us. Foreigners, aliens, our enemies, they distorted history. But we are now matured enough in order to understand, to make researches, to study, to ask questions, and understand what happened to us, or the reality, facts about what happened. So, as you may see, Zogo, that you people, the people that planned the coup, as you've heard, they are not only from Igbos. Later on, they were imprisoned. So there are many things. Before this program ends, you will understand one or two things, and we will keep on repeating. Thank you for listening. We must continue pushing because we now understand and we know that Nigeria is not meant for us. There's something I understand also before I close the program. The colonialists, or Britain, in our own case, any place they go, they always want to maintain. They don't want people to be peaceful there, because, or to be speaking with one voice. They must maintain or distort the equilibrium so that there will be perpetual crisis. They did it in Rwanda, which resulted in the 1994 Rwandan massacre. Only two major tribes, but Belgium gave power and supported. They were not having problems among themselves, but they went and gave preponderance, power, more power to one group over another, one tribe over another, and they know that this will continue causing problems, because the more we have problems, the more the Europeans they benefit from the problems and the inequalities that is existing in their colonial areas or colonized areas. That is the thing. It's like divide and conquer, divide and rule. That is the way they maintain it. So we must learn. But the sad part of it is that many of our people in the political circles in Nigeria, in the present day Nigeria, some of them or many of them don't understand or don't seem to understand what is all the dynamics of power and what happened to us. So, but we must learn. Therefore, we must continue. Do not forget that on the 30th day of May, in Biafra land, it must be total lockdown. Total lockdown. In order to remember those that died that we might live. Thank you for listening. Biafra remains our number one religion. Biafra remains our ideology. Biafra remains our everything. Thank you for listening. From me, Mazi Jonathan Chinedu, together with our brother Mazi Dr. Ukachi. It is simply good evening.
Shots at them, 67 to 70, we remember them. 2016, 38 May, memory still dips in our mind till today. Wonder why they refuse to publicize the genocide. The world media turn blind eyes to our plight. It's time to arise, land of the rising sun. Let's rise one more time, let's rise.
Yo, we will never forget our fallen heroes. Those who gave their life for us. Onitsha massacre, Iwata massacre, Aba massacre. We remember you. Alright.
Tell them I thought that day. Remember when me tell you say I thought that day. Yeah, I remember that one that called us a Bruce Mero. But the way you like a papa nuku. For them they were hero. Me tell you what I look and the what for this Amiro. Me tell you what I day. For me the front and the rest of man I tell you what I am. Me never come up. Me tell them say what
I want to promise you something today. We must fight together. No retreat and no surrender. We must hold them down till the end of time. The most important thing is that we will restore Biafra. May your soul rest in peace.
I look up to the sky with tears in my eye. For other Biafrans and for freedom had to die. We will never forget you as the days go by. You are always in my heart, we'll never be apart.
They fought for our freedom. They died for our freedom. They fought the Nigerian soldiers in the war front without food, without guns, for our freedom, for our life, for our own good, for our children. We love them, our heroes. We want them.
My heart bleeds when I saw them slain. Where will I be now if not then? They will remain indelible in my heart forever, 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 and ever, and ever, and ever.
We serve in your plantation, and the way you paid us back. With your
It is